just to finish up today's session, as you can see, we've got lots of our lovely speakers who are still with us, which is great. And what I'd like to do is just to do a lap around the room. And don't worry, you don't all need to say something about sanctions. It's quite all right. Things got a little bit very well. I mean, of course, very serious there in the last talk. But what I'd like you to do is to have a think about, okay, if you could pick one choice or one decision that somebody with regards to raw materials has to make at some point in time or could make, what do you think would be the most impactful choice that somebody could make? Yes, this is me attempting to get us back to the title of this year's conference, which is, of course, Critical Choices. So what is a choice that you think somebody could or should make that would make a really, really large difference or impact in the world of raw materials? Now, I'm looking at Michael and Mark, and I'm wondering if one of you guys wants to go first. Michael's reaching for his unmute button. Michael, do you want to go first? And then we'll go to Mark. And after that, I'm then going to come across to Ellie. So on you go, Michael.
Yeah, I'm happy to go first because I think I'm going to have to drop off in about 5 minutes. Sorry about that. But, so I think from the perspective of somebody buying raw materials, raw minerals, I would say the most impactful choice is the company you are buying from. And I say this company rather than country. And I say this as somebody who has a background in political risk and country risk. But I think the company, because I think a company that acts responsibly, has all the right processes and systems and governance in place, will in turn hopefully make the right choices about some of the other things that impact on responsible and sustainable mining. So I think the company is critical.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Michael. So Michael is saying the company with whom you do business. Fantastic. Mark, what do you reckon? And then we will go to Ellie. And Ellie, you don't need to say something about the business side. You can talk about haul trucks. It's all good. Mark, what about yourself? And then we'll go to Ellie.
Back to commodity trading. I mentioned that this is the big black box that so few people know about and so little is in the public domain. But it's where the most critical transactions take place. The movement of these commodities across vast distances by a very small number of companies. And they have a very, very good tracking and intelligence system which monitors shipments across the oceans or to the ports and then across the oceans to eventual delivery, containing information about volumes, contents of those. If that was put in the public domain as a global public good, I think that'd be a phenomenal advance. We can't get access to it because it's just too expensive. But it could easily put in the public domain and make an enormous difference to throw in light on what exactly has been transported, where and by whom.
And Mark, in terms of saying we can't get access to it because it's too expensive, how expensive are we talking? Do we know? And if we all club together, could we have something?
Yeah, we thought of that one too, about clubbing together. I think it was when I looked at it 5 years ago in the order of £50,000 a year. So not beyond the reaches of perhaps your own organisation, but I think there are limits on then sharing it as a public good. So yeah, have a look at it.
Yeah, well, I think seeing as Responsible Raw Materials is a volunteer organisation, we certainly don't have the cash, but we'd be delighted to get involved if anybody else wants some partners in this endeavour. Fantastic. Thank you very, very much for that, Mark. Ellie, what do you reckon? And then I'm going to go to Kaisi.
I'm actually going to take it not from a sort of mining point of view, but as just a regular human person, you know, living in the world and in the UK, and I just think that understanding, and it goes back to, you know, the whole education of where things come from, but actually knowing, and I realize we're also a long way from it. In fact, I think back to the first Responsible Raw Materials conference, and there was a talk about sort of fingerprinting fish and metals and identifying the source of a variety of different, you know, commodities, etc. And I think if that information was available more widely, then people might just generally have a better understanding of where things come from. And going back to Pavla's point on the values is, when you understand a bit more, you can probably make those better decisions for yourself, and stick to your own values.
Great. Thank you very, very much for that, Ellie. Fantastic. Kaisi, how about yourself? And then we'll go to Catherine.
From my side, I think there are two issues. The one is the use of technology. I think there's lots of opportunity in terms of infrastructure such as blockchain or artificial intelligence in supporting small-scale miners, creating transparency between end-to-end supply chain. You know where the material is coming from, you know your buyer, the information is shared across all parties because there are lots of players in this market. That's one. I think second is the geopolitical risks. I mean, things are changing. Risks are emerging every day. And so there's a lot of tension between different forces along the world. But I think at the end of the day, we pick winners, we pick losers. So we need to minimize the risk because who becomes a winner, who becomes a loser in the entire ecosystem of trade. I think those are my two issues. Thank you.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, being cognizant of winners and losers depending on which way it's being played. Thank you very much, Kaisi. Fantastic. Kate, how about yourself? And then I'm going to bring in Matt, who has been very quiet during this session, but he has been busy typing away in the chat, etc., behind the scenes. So, Kate, what about yourself?
So I had two thoughts, but they both kind of stem from recognizing the true value of raw materials as natural capital, those mineral abiotic resources, recognizing them as part of our environment. And so for me, as an individual consumer, I think the most powerful thing I could do as an individual member of society at large is consume less. That's the first key thing. And then the second thing is, as an individual who works in and amongst the raw materials sector, to try and relay those messages of the value of abiotic natural capital to policymakers. That's a really, really key thing. How do we actually communicate the vulnerabilities that global society has at large through failing to recognize or appreciate whole systems from a raw materials perspective?
Great. Thank you very much for that, Kate. Fantastic. Matt, how about yourself? And then I'll bring in Aileen.
So the question you've asked is, what's the biggest decision biggest choice that we could make?
Or a choice that somebody could make that would have a big impact with regards to raw materials?
I think one of the, a lot of this always comes back to money. It's a consistent thing we keep saying, who's going to give you the money? So one of the things for me is, it's not just about giving the cash, it's the return on investment. And as soon as you really change those parameters, it completely changes the scale of the decisions you're allowed to make. So whether that's your traders wanting a quick win on certain geopolitical movements or sanctions and things like that, whether it's all the way through to what Kate was talking about, those smaller mining operations where the potential return investment could be quite quick there, but could also be part of a bigger, more broader value kind of proposition. But the other point I wanted to pick up on, which I thought was really good from Kate, and it's one that's kind of keeps bubbling along in the background, is this word value that I've heard people mention and refer to in various different ways, whether that's just value of the mineral in the ground, whether that's value of money, whether that's social value, environmental value. I think that's something that over the course of this week, hopefully we'll get more clarity on. So yeah, lots of choices.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Aileen, how about yourself? And then we'll go to Sophia.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, because I think, like, coming at it, you can come at it from so many different perspectives, and I think that's something we've heard over the last 2 days. It's like everything has a different meaning to someone, and I think we've heard a lot today, especially in the last couple of talks, about ensuring responsible change. And I think a big question about that we need to kind of approach is, what does that actually mean? It's like this is different for everyone. What does responsible sourcing of materials actually mean for one person? Because in like European countries, it's gonna, like in the conversations I've had, it's mostly about trying to avoid like illegal mining, which is often just like ASM or artisanal scale mining, or that's the perception, not that that's actually the case. So we're pushing our ethical views on external countries, and we think we really need to look at that. I don't think we know the answer about how to address those kind of issues, but I think for myself, around a specific choice, I think we all need to kind of step outside of our comfort zone and start to learn about these other elements, because like geology and geosciences and economic geology, it's so connected to the society around us. It's so linked with the people that we engage with, but we actually need to communicate with them and figure out how to communicate with them. So I think like trying to bring in everyone to the conversation, like through events like this, is a really good step. Yeah.
Thanks, Aileen. And finally, Sophia, and then we're going to do one final lap of the room just for final thoughts. And I'm going to go to Mark first, because I know his laptop's about to die. So we are running that race. Sophia, let's come to yourself first.
Thanks, Sarah. I was actually going to steal Kate's one about consuming less, but I think more than consuming less, I'm kind of new to the industry of mining. I'm on a social impact leadership program at the moment, and so this is sort of my first month into the mining industry, and I spend a lot of time with people who care about sustainability and social impact. And I think maybe the next choice is about education or just informing people. I think before the last month, I mean, it's sort of in the term raw materials, you forget that everything comes from these raw materials, and it's so easy to see mining as a boogeyman and something that we are just blankly against, but recognizing that we also use it every day. So I think there's something around that education and informing people about, so you can buy less, but you're making some really intentional purchases because you kind of recognize where things have come from.
Love it. Thank you very much, Sophia. Awesome. And I'm loving the fact that you are with us this week as well, because as someone, as you just said, who's not from a raw materials background, although of course surrounded by them, it's really interesting, you know, kind of hearing and being involved in your commentary actually on all of this as well, which is fantastic. So thank you. Okay, so last stream around the room. Mark, final words of wisdom, comments, ideas, and then we're going to go to Kaisi.
Well, I was looking at Ellie's first slide of what an ideal mine should look like, and I thought, wow, that's such a long way from most people's reality of a mine, and certainly far removed from most mine sites I've ever seen in the global south. So there's a very, very long way to go in that regard. But it certainly made me think about how our communities consulted, not just about the benefits that should accrue to them from mining in their backyard in terms of jobs and better services and housing and roads and other infrastructure, but also to be consulted on how not just the environment is respected, but in terms of how the landscape is evolving, and that they have a say over what it looks like. So thank you for your opening slide, Ellie. Very inspirational.
Thank you very much, Mark. Great. Kaisi, how about yourself? And then we'll go to Ellie.
I think my thoughts are two. One is, I think, how do we use mining to unlock structural transformation? That's what really makes my head ponder, because in my country, in 1990s, we used to export a lot of coffee, cotton, tea. That was large chunk of our export basket, agriculture commodities. Now things have changed. 50% of it is just gold, copper, natural resources. But we are not really seeing, you know, it's just extraction. There's no bit of manufacturing or value-added high-tech type of employment. So when you run out of resources, where do you get the room to grow? So I think for policymakers, traders, there's a big issue to ponder. Once the resources are out, what comes next? So I think for developing countries, there's really issue to unlock. How do you link your natural resources to unlock your structural transformation of your economy? I think that's really the main one of the biggest challenge for the next decades. Thank you.
Love it. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Kaidi. Ellie, how about yourself? And then we'll go to Pavel.
So I guess, and it was sort of, while going through and generating the presentation sort of with the rest of the team, it really to us sort of came back to the early stage. You really need to be thinking about all these risks and the potential risks that you may encounter down the line, and actually finding the opportunity in those to try and mitigate against them. And I keep harping on about, because Richard's was such a great segue from the closure, but it's so critical to be thinking about that early on and really putting the sort of time and resources into working out what you're going to do at the end, because that's where everyone wants to get to. They want a successful mining operation to make money and then to close and restore it to what it was. That's the end goal for all of us.
Fantastic. Thank you very, very much, Ellie. Pavel, how about yourself? And then we'll finish off with Kate.
Right. Well, I could have said a lot about, given the perspective of my professional expertise, I could say a lot about adopting a robust enhanced due diligence, system, etc. However, since I'm one of the last here to speak, I need to be philosophical. So what I would say is that whenever you make decisions in whatever industry you work in, and whenever you make a choice, as a father to a little lovely lady, I should probably say that we should think of the little kids around the world. Don't think I'm trivial here, but I really do think that's important because they are the victims of the sins of the grown-ups. So I would think that is crucial to keep in mind while doing important work on a daily basis.
Absolutely. Thank you very, very much, Pavel. And then finally, Kate, final words from yourself.
Yes, I thought, my talk was about the local and the global, and I've commented how we should be reducing consumption individually, and the sort of knock-on consequences of that is, where are the growth markets going to be at the same time that we are trying to develop regional European resources. And down here in Cornwall, retention of mineral wealth is as much a concern here as Kazi just described for Tanzania. So where producer regions are exporting raw materials at low cost, it fails to add value regionally to economic development. And that we're seeing that coming closer to home. It's very much a concern down here. So if you compare the fact that consumer nations have been traditionally focusing on retaining the highest value end manufacturing parts of the supply chain, and we're now moving upstream, then African nations with the African mining vision are thinking more about moving downstream in the markets. And with the carbon footprints overprinting all of that, that there is a re-equilibration coming down the line, regardless of what people's political positioning would be. I think that's almost inevitable as economies reshape. So that's quite interesting. And I think it's part of a bigger picture that we see here locally as well, is who has access to land, who has access to mineral rights, and who derives benefit. And as we see that there is increasing conflict, and Richard mentioned a couple of case studies down here as well, one where things haven't been done quite so well. If we don't get it right, the mining doesn't go ahead. And who derives wealth and who has access to land and mineral rights is really, really wrapped up in that. And that's quite a tricky thing to unpick. So I think lots of reshaping within nation and internationally on some of these issues is going to be quite a significant rebalancing as climate change does bite. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Kate. And thank you to all of our wonderful speakers for today's afternoon session, so session number 3 of this year's Responsible Raw Materials Conference.